my photo taste is the Pinterest, because they are the best.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Hello, I'm Geeta Gurumurthy. You're watching Lingo Hack from BBC Learning English. Today's news stories are...
Brexit. What next for UK? Syria's World Cup hopes. New British coin, most secure in the world.
Here are the words and phrases for you to learn.
Triggered. Unpick. Unfolding. Hologram.
Let's hear more about today's news stories. Once Article 50 has been triggered, the UK has just 2 years to negotiate its exit from the EU.
Triggered. Triggered. Made to start.
Once Article 50 has been triggered, the UK has just 2 years to negotiate its exit from the EU. No country has ever tried this before. It is a very complicated process. First, the European Council, which is made up of the EU's 27 leaders, agrees guidelines for the negotiations. Then, the European Commission then negotiates with the UK on behalf of the EU. Together, they will need to unpick 43 years of treaties and agreements.
Unpick. Unpick. Carefully and gradually undo or remove.
Together, they will need to unpick 43 years of treaties and agreements.
Given what's unfolding in Syria. Unfolding. Unfolding. Developing. Happening. Given what's unfolding in Syria, you might be surprised to hear the country still has a national football team competing for a place in next year's World Cup. For obvious reasons, they can't play on home soil, but they're still giving many Syrians a reason to come together. Last week, they were in Malaysia, preparing for a World Cup qualifier against Uzbekistan. And they've just been in Seoul for their match against South Korea.
Here is the new pound coin, and it does have some special security features apart from being 12-sided and two-coloured. It's got very small writing on it, and it has a sort of hologram with the pound sign at the bottom.
Hologram. Hologram. Three-dimensional picture created using lasers.
Here is the new pound coin, and it does have some special security features apart from being 12-sided and two-coloured. It's got very small writing on it, and it has a sort of hologram with the pound sign at the bottom, and a special feature inside which means that coin machines can recognise whether it's genuine or not, and that's important because there are so many fakes of the old pound coin.
That's all from Lingo Hack for today.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, I'm Feifei, and this is the English we speak. With me is Rob.
Hello, everyone.
Rob, are you okay? You look in pain.
I am. I've just been to the dentist.
Oh, not my favourite place, but I guess you had to go to research today's piece of authentic English.
Excuse me?
Well, today's expression is to cut your teeth, and dentists look at teeth.
Sorry, Feifei. That's one tooth-related expression that doesn't need a dentist. When you cut your teeth, you get your first experience doing something in a particular job.
Oh, really? So it's like work experience?
Yes, that's one way of learning a new skill, which you might use later in your job. I cut my teeth in radio production by working in local radio.
And you're still cutting your teeth now, Rob.
Aha. Let's hear some examples of this phrase, shall we?
Dan cut his teeth on a local newspaper before landing a job on a national daily.
He cut his teeth running the junior football club before becoming a professional referee.
So, to cut your teeth means to acquire initial practice or experience in a particular job or activity. We could say it's where you get your basic skills.
Correct. So, where do you think you cut your teeth for this job, Feifei?
I cut my media teeth at university.
Oh,
Sorry, what did I say?
Oh, no, sorry, it's not you. It's this filling I had done. That's why I went to the dentist. Oh, he really was rough.
Oh, that's not nice. I think you should go home and rest.
Maybe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ouch.
The English we speak.
From BBC.
News review from BBC Learning English. Hello and welcome to News Review, the programme where we show you how to use the language from the latest news stories in your everyday English. Hi, I'm Neil. Joining me is Catherine. Hello,
Hi,
Catherine.
Neil.
So, what's our story?
Today's story, Neil, is about a food that a lot of people around the world eat for breakfast, but which could actually be bad for your health.
An unhealthy breakfast. Okay, let's find out more about that from this BBC News Bulletin.
Government scientists are warning that overcooked foods, such as potatoes, toast, crisps and waffles, could increase the risk of developing cancer. The Food Standards Agency says a potentially harmful compound called acrylamide is produced when starchy foods are roasted, fried or grilled for too long at high temperatures.
So, starch is the white substance that you get in food, such as potatoes when you cut them, or you can see it when you soak rice in water. That white stuff that comes out, that's called starch. Now, British government agency has said that starchy food, like bread, potatoes, if you cook them too long, they can actually cause cancer. So if you burn your toast in the morning, Neil, and eat it, that can potentially be quite dangerous.
Well, I often burn my toast, so I will look at this story with interest. You've been checking out the story on the various news websites and picked out 3 items of vocabulary.
I have, and we have over, potential, and browned off.
Over, potential, and browned off. So what's your first headline then?
Okay, so we're going to The Independent, and their headline says, overcooked potatoes and burned toast could cause cancer, new research suggests.
Okay, so over here used as a prefix or prefix to mean too much.
Absolutely, yes.
It's quite, it's very handy, isn't it, this?
Over, meaning too much, you can put it in front of hundreds and hundreds of words, and it just means too much of something. So here we have it in front of, you can use it in front of a verb. To overcook something means to cook something too much.
Yep.
Or you can make it into an adjective or a passive. So in the headline we have overcooked potatoes, and it means too much cooking.
Yeah, so we have other examples of verbs. To overdo.
Yeah, you can overdo pretty much anything, Neil. If you go out running one day, jogging, and you come back exhausted,
yes,
I can say, oh no, he's overdone the jogging.
Yeah, I've been overdoing it.
You've been overdoing it, yes.
Yeah.
Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it.
You can also use it with adjectives, can't you?
Yeah, you can. You can be, if you go running, this running thing, you've been jogging all day long, you come back, yes, you're overhot.
I'm overhot.
And you're also probably
overtired.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Just like the kids after a long day.
Yes, there's nothing worse than overtired.
Indeed,
child.
yeah.
Now, I noticed in that headline it had a hyphen, over hyphen cook.
Yeah.
But in the dictionary I used to look this word up, there was no hyphen. So what's going on?
A hyphen is a cheeky little monkey, and hyphens will appear in some places and disappear in other places. There's quite often, even dictionaries don't agree about hyphens. So as a general rule, check in your dictionary, but don't worry if they're inconsistent. One dictionary says hyphen, the other one says don't. Go with what you like and be consistent.
Yeah, and you will also, it's quite frustrating probably, you will see the word with a hyphen maybe on one particular news outlet website, and then you'll see it differently on the BBC.
Happens all the time.
It's because nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And these organisations have their own style guide. They've decided they should be consistent within their own output, but
yes.
My thought of taste is the Pinterest, because they are the best. Flick to link, a link to flick.
The last time I heard my son's voice was when he walked out the front door on his way to school. He called out one word in the darkness, bye. It was April 20th, 1999. Later that morning at Columbine High School, my son Dylan and his friend Eric killed 12 students and a teacher, and wounded more than 20 others before taking their own lives. 13 innocent people were killed, leaving their loved ones in a state of grief and trauma. Others sustained injuries, some resulting in disfigurement and permanent disability. But the enormity of the tragedy can't be measured only by the number of deaths and injuries that took place. There's no way to quantify the psychological damage of those who were in the school or who took part in rescue or cleanup efforts. There's no way to assess the magnitude of a tragedy like Columbine, especially when it can be a blueprint for other shooters who go on to commit atrocities of their own. Columbine was a tidal wave, and when the crash ended, it would take years for the community and for society to comprehend its impact. It has taken me years to try to accept my son's legacy. The cruel behavior that defined the end of his life showed me that he was a completely different person from the one I knew. Afterwards, people asked, "How could you not know? What kind of a mother were you?" I still ask myself those same questions. Before the shootings, I thought of myself as a good mom, helping my children become caring, healthy, responsible adults was the most important role in my life. But the tragedy convinced me that I failed as a parent, and it's partially this sense of failure that brings me here today. Aside from his father, I was the one person who knew and loved Dylan the most. If anyone could have known what was happening, it should have been me, right? But I didn't know. Today I'm here to share the experience of what it's like to be the mother of someone who kills and hurts. For years after the tragedy, I combed through memories, trying to figure out exactly where I failed as a parent. But there are no simple answers. I can't give you any solutions. All I can do is share what I have learned. When I talk to people who didn't know me before the shootings, I have 3 challenges to meet. First, when I walk into a room like this, I never know if someone there has experienced loss because of what my son did. I feel a need to acknowledge the suffering caused by a member of my family who wasn't here to do it for himself. So first, with all of my heart, I'm sorry if my son has caused you pain. The second challenge I have is that I must ask for understanding and even compassion when I talk about my son's death as a suicide. 2 years before he died, he wrote on a piece of paper in a notebook that he was cutting himself. He said that he was in agony and wanted to get a gun so he could end his life. I didn't know about any of this until months after his death. When I talk about his death as a suicide, I'm not trying to downplay the viciousness he showed at the end of his life. I'm trying to understand how his suicidal thinking led to murder. After a lot of reading and talking with experts, I've come to believe that his involvement in the shootings was rooted not in his desire to kill, but in his desire to die. The third challenge I have when I talk about my son's murder-suicide is that I'm talking about mental health. Is that I'm talking about mental health, or brain health as I prefer to call it because it's more concrete. And in the same breath, I'm talking about violence. The last thing I want to do is to contribute to the misunderstanding that already exists around mental illness. Only a very small percent of those who have a mental illness are violent toward other people. But of those who die by suicide, it's estimated that about 75 to maybe more than 90% have a diagnosable mental health condition of some kind. As you all know very well, our mental health care system is not equipped to help everyone. And not everyone with destructive thoughts fits the criteria for a specific diagnosis. Many who have ongoing feelings of fear, or anger or hopelessness are never assessed or treated. Too often they get our attention only if they reach a behavioral crisis. If estimates are correct, that about 1 to 2% of all suicides involves the murder of another person, when suicide rates rise, as they are rising for some populations, then murder-suicide rates will rise as well. I wanted to understand what was going on in Dylan's mind prior to his death, so I looked for answers from other survivors of suicide loss. I did research and volunteered to help with fundraising events, and whenever I could, I talked with those who had survived their own suicidal crisis or attempt. One of the most helpful conversations I had was with a coworker who overheard me talking to someone else in my office cubicle. She heard me say that Dylan could not have loved me if he could do something as horrible as he did. Later, when she found me alone, she apologized for overhearing that conversation, but told me that I was wrong. She said that when she was a young single mother with 3 small children, she became severely depressed and was hospitalized to keep her safe. At the time, she was certain that her children would be better off if she died, so she had made a plan to end her life. She assured me that a mother's love was the strongest bond on earth, and that she loved her children more than anything in the world. But because of her illness, she was sure that they would be better off without her. What she said, and what I've learned from others, is that we do not make the so-called decision or choice to die by suicide in the same way that we choose what car to drive or where to go on a Saturday night. When someone is in an extremely suicidal state, they are in a stage 4 medical health emergency. Their thinking is impaired and they've lost access to tools of self-governance. Even though they can make a plan and act with logic, their sense of truth is distorted by a filter of pain through which they interpret their reality. Some people can be very good at hiding this state, and they often have good reasons for doing that. Many of us have suicidal thoughts at some point, but persistent, ongoing thoughts of suicide and devising a means to die are symptoms of pathology, and like many illnesses, the condition has to be recognized and treated before life is lost. But my son's death was not purely a suicide. It involved mass murder. I wanted to know how his suicidal thinking became homicidal. But research is sparse and there are no simple answers. Yes, he probably had ongoing depression. He had a personality that was perfectionistic and self-reliant, and that made him less likely to seek help from others. He had experienced triggering events at the school that left him feeling debased and humiliated and mad. And he had a complicated friendship with a boy who shared his feelings of rage and alienation, and who was seriously disturbed, controlling, and homicidal. And on top of this period in his life of extreme vulnerability and fragility, Dylan found access to guns, even though we'd never owned any in our home. It was appallingly easy for a 17-year-old boy to buy guns, both legally and illegally, without my permission or knowledge. And somehow, 17 years and many school shootings later, it's still appallingly easy. What Dylan did that day broke my heart. And as trauma so often does, it took a toll on my body and on my mind. 2 years after the shootings, I got breast cancer. And 2 years after that, I began to have mental health problems. On top of the constant, perpetual grief, I was terrified that I would run into a family member of someone Dylan had killed, or be accosted by the press, or by an angry citizen. I was afraid to turn on the news, afraid to hear myself being called a terrible parent or a disgusting person. I started having panic attacks. The first bout started 4 years after the shootings, when I was getting ready for the depositions and would have to meet the victims' families face to face. The second round started 6 years after the shootings, when I was preparing to speak publicly about murder-suicide for the first time at a conference. Both episodes lasted several weeks.
Flick to link to flick.
Happened.
My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Hello, I'm Geeta Gurumurthy. You're watching Lingo Hack from BBC Learning English. Today's news stories are
Brexit. What next for UK? Syria's World Cup hopes. New British coin, most secure in the world.
Here are the words and phrases for you to learn.
Triggered. Unpick. Unfolding. Hologram.
Let's hear more about today's news stories.
Once Article 50 has been triggered, the UK has just 2 years to negotiate its exit from the EU.
Triggered. Triggered. Made to start.
Once Article 50 has been triggered, the UK has just 2 years to negotiate its exit from the EU. No country has ever tried this before. It is a very complicated process. First, the European Council, which is made up of the EU's 27 leaders, agrees guidelines for the negotiations. Then, the European Commission then negotiates with the UK on behalf of the EU. Together, they will need to unpick 43 years of treaties and agreements.
Unpick. Unpick. Carefully and gradually undo or remove.
Together, they will need to unpick 43 years of treaties and agreements.